Ever held something in your arms and thought, this is supposed to protect them? Those tiny fingers, that soft skin, innocence you'd move heaven and earth to shield. But history, it's littered with baby items so misguided, so horrifying. They make your head spin. Tonight, we're stepping into the bizarre, the shocking, the truly because when we confront how far we've strayed, no matter how well-meaning we spark change, have to understand something. Back then, the world was different. People thought they were doing the right thing, even when it looks insane to us now. They called it progress. They called it fresh air. They called it care in cramped apartments with no yards, no parks nearby, and no way to take the baby outside safely every day. Someone came up with the idea of the baby cage, a steel and wire contraption that hung right outside the window, suspended high above the street. They told themselves it was healthy. The child would get sunshine, clean air, a break from the stale, smoky rooms inside. They believed they were helping. But what they didn't see was the danger staring them in the face. A baby hanging outside a building with nothing but thin bars between them and a fall. The rush of wind, the blare of traffic, the smell of the city below. No matter how strong the steel was, one wrong move, one weak bolt, one moment of human error, and a life could be gone. Picture a young mother, exhausted, living in a noisy London flat in the 1930s. She wants to give her child what the magazines say every baby needs: fresh air and sunshine. She reads an ad about this miraculous cage that can clip right onto her window. The photos show smiling babies in cozy blankets, the sun shining on their faces, the caption promising better health, stronger lungs, and peaceful naps. She saves money, buys one, and straps her little one inside. And in her mind, she's doing the best thing she can. She isn't thinking about the possibility of disaster. She's thinking about what the experts say. She's thinking about trust. But here's the thing about trust. It's a dangerous currency when it's placed in the wrong hands. History has shown that good intentions without wisdom can lead to heartbreak. There are stories buried in old newspaper archives of babies falling when the cage wasn't secured properly. Stories of parents who turned away for a second only to hear the sound they'd never forget. These tragedies didn't happen every day, but they happened enough, and each one was enough to rip apart a family and shake a community. The question is, why did it take so long for people to see the risk for what it was? Because when something is dressed up as innovation, when it comes wrapped in the approval of experts, when it promises to make life easier, we want to believe it. We want to believe we can have all the benefits without the costs. Now think about your own life. How many times have you been sold a promise, a shortcut, a way to make things easier, faster, better? How many times have you trusted something because everyone else seemed to? And how often have you stopped to ask, is this actually safe? Is this actually wise? The baby cage is not just some strange artifact from a bygone era. It's a symbol of what happens when we let convenience outweigh caution, when we let the appearance of progress blind us to the dangers that hide underneath. It's a warning to never let popular opinion make you stop thinking for yourself. There's another layer to this. Parents back then weren't evil or careless. Most loved their children fiercely. But they lived in a world that often pushed them to believe they were not enough on their own, that they needed this product, this advice, this tool to be a good parent. And that kind of pressure is still alive today. It's just in different packaging, social media feeds showing picture-perfect nurseries, ads promising smarter toys, safer strollers, miracle formulas, all of them whispering the same message. If you don't have this, you're not doing enough. And that's when we make decisions without questioning them. That's when the baby cage comes back not as a steel box on a windowsill, but as any product, habit, or belief we accept without thinking. The courage here is in being willing to ask the hard questions. The courage is in standing up and saying, I'm not putting my child or myself in harm's way just because everyone else is doing it. The courage is in seeing past the marketing, past the approval, and into the truth. Back then, it meant saying no to the cage, no matter how many neighbors used one. Today, it might mean saying no to a trend, a fad, a quick fix, even if it makes you the odd one out, but that's how change starts. That's how safety improves. That's how lives are saved. So when you hear about the baby cage, don't just laugh it off as some weird old invention. See it as a mirror, a reminder that every generation has its own cages, its own blind spots, its own products that seem smart until we realize they're dangerous. See it as proof that the responsibility to protect the vulnerable will never be outsourced to gadgets, to companies, to trends. It will always rest on the shoulders of those who care enough to think, to question, to fight for what's truly safe. The people who are willing to be unpopular if it means doing the right thing. One day, people will look back at some of the things we do now and shake their heads the same way we do about the baby cage. And when that day comes, you'll want to be on the side of the people who saw the danger before tragedy struck. You'll want to be the one who said, no, not my child. No, not my family. No, not my life. You'll want to be the one who didn't need history to tell you that safety, wisdom, and love are worth more than convenience and conformity. Because in the end, the baby cage was never really about the steel or the bolts or the window. It was about a choice between trusting the easy answer or doing the harder work of thinking for yourself. A choice between blind faith in the new and a careful respect for the fragile life in your care. And that choice, that's not just for parents in the 1930s. That's for all of us, every single day. There was a time when the word science carried an almost magical weight. If something had the blessing of science, people didn't just trust it, they worshipped it. In the early and mid-1900s, that worship turned into something deadly. Imagine being a parent back then. You walk into a pharmacy, see a beautiful tin of baby powder with shining labels and bold claims. It says it will soothe your baby's skin, prevent rashes, and even make them healthier. You see teething tablets that promise to ease your child's pain, help them sleep better, make them calm, and printed right there in proud letters is a strange, glowing word. Radium, thorium, polonium. You don't know what it means, but the man in the white coat says it's progress. He says it's backed by science, and you want the best for your child. So you hand over your money. No one told those parents the truth. No one told them that the same substance making those labels glow in the dark was slowly poisoning their children from the inside out, that the powders they patted onto delicate skin-carried particles that could enter the bloodstream, that the teething tablets didn't just numb pain. They introduced radiation into growing bones and organs. To those parents, these were miracles in a bottle. To history, they became silent killers. It's easy to judge from the outside looking back. We think, how could they not know? How could they not ask questions? But imagine being in their shoes. You're holding a crying baby in the middle of the night, desperate to stop the pain. You've been told that science is the future, that these products are cutting, that doctors and researchers stand behind them. You want to believe you're doing the right thing. And so you do what so many before you have done you trust. But here's the danger with trust when it's blind. It can cost you more than you can afford. It can cost you health. It can cost you safety. It can cost you life itself. History shows us that over and over again, for years, radioactive products were sold for adults and children alike, face creams, drinks, even toothpaste. And when the dangers started to emerge, the truth didn't come out all at once. It dripped out slowly, buried in medical journals and ignored by companies who didn't want to lose profits. By the time regulations finally banned these products, the damage had already been done to countless lives. There's a lesson here, and it's not just about science from 100 years ago. It's about the way we handle every shiny new promise that comes our way. Think about your own life. How many things have you been told were perfectly safe, perfectly healthy, perfectly good only, to find out later that they carried hidden risks? How many times have you looked back and realized the warning signs were there all along, but you were too caught up in the promise to notice? That's not weakness, it's human. We all want to believe in progress. We all want to believe in quick fixes. We all want to believe in solutions that make life easier. But history demands that we be wiser. Parents who used radioactive baby powder didn't set out to harm their children. They were victims of an era that confused innovation with safety. They didn't know they were part of an experiment with no informed consent. And today, we have our own versions of that same experiment, different products, different promises, but the same pressure to believe without questioning, the same pressure to buy, to try, to trust. The way forward is not to reject all science, all progress, all new ideas. The way forward is to demand transparency, to ask the uncomfortable questions before we open the bottle, before we hand over our money, before we put our trust into something that could harm the very people we're trying to protect. The way forward is to understand that not everything wrapped in the language of advancement is good for us. When I think about those babies, I think about how vulnerable they were, how their parents thought they were giving them comfort when, in reality, they were setting them on a path toward illness. I think about the parents who had to live with the guilt once the truth came out, and I think about how easily that same pattern could repeat if we let history fade into the background. You might not be using radioactive powder today, but you are being sold ideas, products, and solutions every single day. Some of them will truly help you. Some will harm you in ways you won't see until it's too late. And the only shield you have against that is awareness. That shield is your willingness to slow down, to read, to learn, to challenge the claims being made. That shield is your refusal to put blind faith in a system that has gotten it wrong before. It takes courage to question what everyone else accepts. It takes strength to say no when everyone else is saying yes. But that's the kind of courage that changes the story. That's the kind of courage that keeps us from repeating the same mistakes. Every parent, every leader, every person who has someone depending on them has a responsibility to protect that trust. And protecting it means guarding it fiercely, never handing it over cheaply. Those radioactive products from the past are gone now, banned by law and replaced by safer alternatives. But the temptation to trust without thought hasn't gone anywhere. The next time you're offered something that promises the world, remember those parents, remember those babies, remember that sometimes the most dangerous things come dressed as blessings. And remember that your choices, your careful, informed, intentional choices are the difference between repeating history and rewriting it. Because the truth is, history will always try to teach us the same lesson until we finally listen. The health and safety of the vulnerable can never be left to chance, to profit, or to blind trust. It belongs in the hands of those who are willing to question, to learn, and to act with courage. And those hands can be yours if you choose to use them. There's a certain innocence in the way people decorate a nursery. Fresh paint on the walls, bright colors, patterns that make the room feel alive. It's a labor of love, a way to welcome a child into the world with warmth and beauty. But sometimes love and danger can live in the same room without anyone realizing it. Decades ago, that danger came in the form of lead-based paint. It was everywhere on the walls, on the crib, on the toys, even on the murals painted by loving hands. People didn't see it as a threat. They saw it as durable, long-lasting, rich in color. They saw it as a good choice. And because no one told them otherwise, they believed it was safe. What they didn't know was that lead is a silent destroyer, especially for children. A baby's body is still developing. Their brain is still forming connections at lightning speed. When lead enters that system, it doesn't just pass through, it stays. It builds up. It interferes with growth, with learning, with the ability to focus and think clearly. It can't be seen. It can't be smelled. And back then, it wasn't tested for. Parents painted with pride and without meaning to. They were covering their child's world in something toxic. Imagine a toddler in the 1960s, curious and full of energy, pulling themselves up on the side of their crib. The paint has started to chip from years of use. Tiny flakes break loose and end up in their mouth. It doesn't take much, just a little bit over time for the damage to begin. Parents notice the child is quieter, maybe slower to speak. They think it's just a phase. But lead has already started its work. And by the time anyone realizes the effects are permanent, there were thousands of children like that, their futures quietly stolen by something no one thought to question. It's a tragedy, but it's also a lesson about the danger of trusting too much in what's common. The fact that everyone was using lead paint didn't make it safe. The fact that it was sold in every store didn't mean it was harmless. And the fact that no one was talking about the risks didn't mean those risks weren't there. That's the thing about hidden danger. It thrives in silence. It waits in the places we don't think to look, and it hides in the things we think are normal. This isn't just about paint. It's about the way we approach everything in life. How often do we look at something and say, everyone's doing it, so it must be fine? How often do we skip asking questions because the answer might slow us down, might make things harder, might force us to change our plans? The people who painted nurseries with lead didn't set out to harm their children. They just didn't know. And that's the point. Sometimes the most dangerous mistakes we make are the ones we make in ignorance. When the truth finally came out, when studies began linking lead exposure to developmental delays, learning disabilities, and health problems, there was outrage. Laws were passed. Lead paint was banned in homes, schools, and nurseries. But those changes didn't come until after the damage was done. Generations of children had already been affected. Families had already been changed forever. And once again, the lesson was written in the costs. Prevention is always cheaper than repair, and protection is always better than regret. Think about your own life. What's the lead paint in your world right now? What's the thing that seems harmless because it's everywhere, but might be causing harm in ways you can't yet see? It might be a habit, a relationship, a way of thinking. It might be a product you've never questioned, a routine you've never examined, a belief you've never challenged. Just because it's familiar doesn't mean it's safe. Just because it's pretty doesn't mean it's good. Just because it's easy doesn't mean it's right. There's courage in being willing to look closer. There's strength in being the one to ask, what's really in this? What's the cost? What's the truth? Back when lead paint was the norm, the people who questioned it were seen as alarmists, overreacting, making trouble. But they were the ones who sparked change. They were the ones who forced companies and lawmakers to face the danger. They were the reason future nurseries could be painted without poison in the walls. That's the kind of voice the world always needs. Someone willing to speak up before the harm becomes history. If you've ever doubted your ability to make a difference, think about that one person asking the right question at the right time can change the future for thousands. It's not always glamorous. It's not always welcomed, but it's always worth it. The alternative is silence, and silence is what lets the paint keep peeling. The poison keeps spreading. The harm keep building until it's too late. When you hear the phrase lead-painted nursery decorations, don't just picture an old room in a black and white photograph. Picture the hidden dangers in your own time, your own space, your own decisions. Picture the responsibility you have to see what others overlook, and picture the lives that could be better, stronger, safer. You chose to ask questions and act with courage. The story of lead paint is not just about what went wrong. It's also about what went right when people refused to accept that wrong as normal. It's about the power of knowledge, the necessity of vigilance, and the unshakable duty to protect the vulnerable. Those lessons didn't end when the paint was banned. They're alive every time we make a choice about what we bring into our homes, what we put in our bodies, and what we pass on to the next generation. Because in the end, the nursery is more than a room. It's a symbol of the future. And the future depends on what we build into it or what we keep out. There's a moment every parent looks forward to, that first time their baby moves from milk to real food. It's messy. It's funny. It's a milestone. You grab the spoon, you scoop up the food, and you watch their little face light up. Or twist in surprise at the new taste. Over the years, products were created to make that process easier. One of those ideas was the infant spoon feeder, a soft pouch or silicone sleeve you could fill with fruit, vegetables, or purees. The baby could hold it, chew it, and feed themselves safelier. At least that's what the packaging promised. But there's a difference between the promise and the reality. In reality, some of those feeders had designs that didn't stand up to real-world use. Pieces could tear off, small parts could break away. And for a baby whose entire way of exploring the world is putting things in their mouth, that tiny broken piece wasn't just an inconvenient sit, was a choking hazard. Parents bought them believing they were safe, believing they were helping their child learn to eat independently. They didn't expect that same product to put their child in danger. Imagine the scene, a mother in her kitchen blending up fresh fruit, proud she's giving her baby something healthy. She fills the feeder, hands it over, and watches her child gnaw happily. Then, in a split second, the joy turns to panic. The baby's eyes widen, their face reddens. A small piece has broken loose and lodged in their throat. That moment feels like the longest minute of a parent's life. You're slamming on their back, calling for help, doing everything you can to bring them back. The fear is indescribable, and in some cases, tragedy followed before help could arrive. When recalls started to roll out in the 1990s and early 2000s, parents learned that these incidents weren't isolated. Reports had been made, complaints filed, but like so many safety issues, it often takes multiple accidents, sometimes fatal, once before action is taken. That's a hard truth to swallow. A product designed for the most vulnerable among us should never get to the market without being tested to the point of exhaustion. Yet history has shown us again and again that safety is too often a second thought, added only after damage is done. This is about more than a faulty spoon. It's about the way we think about trust. We trust companies to care about our safety as much as they care about their profits. We trust labels that say safe, child-friendly, and tested without asking what those words really mean. We trust that because it's sold in a store, it's been vetted enough. But every single recall in history is proof that trust without verification can be dangerous. In life, there will always be things that look like they're designed to help us. Things that promise to make a hard process easier, a rough path smoother. But you have to ask yourself, has this been proven in the real world? Has it been tested against the worst case scenario? Because if it hasn't, you might be the one to find out the hard way. And the hard way is always too expensive. These feeders weren't invented by people who wanted to hurt children. They were created by people who saw a need and thought they had the answer, but good intentions aren't enough. The world is full of ideas that start in hope and end in harm because they weren't tested, they weren't challenged, they weren't questioned. And that's where our responsibility comes in, not just as parents, but as people. We have to be willing to slow down, to dig deeper, to demand proof before we trust. Every choice you make for your child or for yourself is a form of building. You're building habits, safety nets, and futures. But what you build with matters. If the material is weak, if the foundation is flawed, it doesn't matter how good it looks, it won't hold when the pressure comes. A spoon feeder with a weak seal is just like a life choice built on weak information. It will fail you when you need it most. Some parents, after close calls, threw those feeders away and went back to the Besigza small spoon, their own hands. A slower, more mindful process. They didn't care if it was messier or it took longer, because they understood something a product couldn't replace: the importance of being present, watching and protecting in real time. And maybe that's the deeper lesson here. We can't outsource vigilance. No product, no technology, no trend can replace the watchful eye and careful judgment of someone who truly cares. Think about the moments in your own life where you've handed over your safety to something or someone else because it was easier. Maybe it worked out fine. Maybe you got lucky. But what would it look like if you stayed alert instead? What would it look like if you never assumed something was safe just because it was popular? That's not ferret's wisdom. Wisdom keeps you from learning the hard way. Wisdom is what keeps the people you love out of harm's path. The story of the infant spoon feeder with choke hazard designs isn't just about a flawed baby product. It's about how easy it is to be lulled into a false sense of security. It's about how convenience can blind us to risk. And it's about the kind of strength it takes to slow down in a world that's always telling you to speed up. One day, someone is going to look back at the things we use today and wonder how we ever thought they were safe. And when that happens, you want to be the person who saw the danger early, who asked the hard questions, who chose caution over convenience, because when it comes to the vulnerable, whether that's a child, a loved one, or even yourself, there's no such thing as too careful. Safety doesn't happen by accident. It happens because someone decided to make it happen. It happens because someone refused to accept risk as the cost of progress. And it happens because someone cared enough to watch closely, think critically, and act quickly. You can be that someone, and the lives you protect because of it will never forget you for it. Asterisk.